Our next guest is up here to do a very, very, very important duty. Every day, he does an even more important duty. He is one of our final line of control to keep the out-of-control Republicans held accountable. He is our new state watchdog. He is our state auditor, Rob Sant.
Good evening, Story County Democrats. How's everybody doing? All right. We're going to have a fun night. Are you ready for a year of excitement?
Yes!
Are you ready for a year of a lot of new friends? So, I was asked to come speak tonight, and I knew right away what I wanted to come talk about. Later on, they asked me to do the hat pass. Oh, you're doing it now? Wonderful. Thank you. Pass the buckets. Put your money in the buckets. And if you will, please, lend me your ear, okay? A lot of people noticed that we had an unusual occurrence at the State Appeal Board meeting last month. It was a 2-to-1 vote. Nobody remembers the last time we had one. And if you recall, it was in regard to the sexual harassment settlements for Dave Jamieson. This was my second State Appeal Board meeting as the new State Auditor. New guy on the block. Two of the other folks involved are people I have just an unbelievable amount of respect for. The Attorney General's office, Tom Miller, where I worked for 8 years. Someone that I look up to, someone that is a mentor to me. And Mike Fitzgerald, who's not just a great state treasurer, but someone that literally picks up the phone in the first ring every time I call him with a question. Right? So what I want to talk to you tonight about is how difficult it is to do something to show that you disagree with people that you respect and who share your political party. Because these settlements came forward, and if you don't know the story is horrific. Dave Jamieson, as head of the Iowa Finance Authority, committed really, truly horrific acts of sexual harassment. Not only that, but he intimidated the people who worked in that office. They would try to stop him. They'd try to correct him. He'd say, "You must be allergic to a paycheck." Can you imagine what it felt like to go to work in that office? And I wanted to know this. I'm sitting on a board being asked to write a check with your money. Taxpayer money. And I just wanted to know this before I did that. Is Dave Jamieson going to be asked to chip in? And I wasn't able to get an answer. Now, it is my hope that the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office will decide to file a restitution suit against Dave Jamieson and to go after him. Yeah, let's hope they do that. Let's hope that they do that. But for me, being asked to write a check on behalf of taxpayers, not knowing the answer to that question, I wasn't ready to do that. I wanted to know that he was going to be asked to pitch in before I was willing to agree to write a check of your money. Let me tell you why. I spent 8 years in the Attorney General's office. Most of what I did was financial crimes prosecution. It's how I got to know the State Auditor's office. But a big piece of what I did, the second biggest piece of what I did, were sex abuse cases. Sexually violent predator, civil commitment cases. The worst of the worst. Now, every time you pick a jury in a courtroom, you tell people what the case is going to be about, and you ask them if they might have some reason that they cannot be an impartial juror in that case. If it's a robbery case, someone might raise their hand and say, "I was robbed once, and I think if I'm sitting on this jury, I'm not going to be able to be impartial because I'm going to be thinking about the time that I was robbed." Right? That's a little unusual. You know what's really common? Ladies and gentlemen, every time you pick a jury in a sex abuse case in the state of Iowa, it's not 2 people who go back into the judge's chambers and say, "I can't sit on this case because I was sexually abused." It's not 5 people who do it. It's 8. It's 12. I have been in judges' chambers all around the state of Iowa and sat there with a judge, a defense attorney, and myself, while individual jurors came back one by one and told us things that had happened to them that they had never told anyone before. People who had been married for 50 years whose spouse didn't know that they were raped, whose spouse didn't know that they were sexually assaulted. And every time for 8 years that I picked one of those juries, it struck me and it stayed with me. And I just have one question. How are we going to change anything if we don't change something? How are we going to change anything if we don't change something? Do we want to have an impact? Do we want to reduce the amount of sexual abuse, the amount of sexual harassment that happens in Iowa? Well, then maybe we need to change something. Maybe what we need to do is hold people accountable when they're the ones that have done the deed. And if we want to do that, not only are we going to deter people from committing acts of sexual harassment like Dave Jamieson, but we're going to put taxpayers in a better position, because the fewer people who are public employees who commit acts of sexual harassment, the fewer times taxpayers are going to be on the hook for it. This is not complicated. But I lost a lot of sleep over this decision because I have so much respect for Tom Miller and so much respect for his recommendation. Yet at the same time, I ended up voting against it because I simply disagreed with this individual. Right? And because every time I traveled the state for a year running for state auditor, I said, I'm going to be someone who puts the public ahead of my party. I am not going to be someone who simply does what everyone expects me to do because I'm a member of a certain party. And this is an office that's supposed to be nonpartisan. It's supposed to be a taxpayer's watchdog. And frankly, despite having lost a lot of sleep over it, I still cast that no vote. First 2-to-1 vote that anybody can remember. Because if we're going to change something, we have to change something. And so that's the start of it. We'll see what goes on from there. Now, that's most of what I wanted to talk about. But then I did see something on Twitter. And so, with your permission, if you will all not get all worked up about it, can I say a couple things about the junior senator from Iowa?
Yeah.
All right. Don't know if you've noticed, but we've had a couple disagreements with China lately. And the head of the Iowa Soybean Association said recently that it's going to take 8 to 10 years for Iowa's farmers just to get back to where we were if everything got better today. 8 to 10 years. All right? We've had $7 billion getting paid out from the federal government to farmers who have suffered losses because of the tariffs. So we're borrowing money to China to pay people for not selling their products to China. Okay? And yet, the junior senator from Iowa, Senator Ernst, tweeted today that we are so grateful to have a conservative leader who puts agriculture first. I noticed that on Twitter. I thought, I don't think that's someone that's lost as much sleep about their decisions as I have. And then I noticed something else. Governor of South Dakota, who's a Republican, admitting the truth. Saying that the trade wars have been devastating for the agricultural economy. Devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you from personal experience, having only been in the job 6 weeks, it is hard to stick up to people, to disagree with people publicly who are a member of your party, who you look to as leaders. But I can also tell you this, things aren't going to get better unless we see a lot more of that. Thank you.